Hello everyone, this is Ashish Saini from Innovate Yourself. Welcome back to my channel. Once again, I am back with a very interesting topic for your Rasa chatbot, and in today's session I am going to talk about the very small but the very important topic for your Rasa chatbot, based on which your Rasa chatbot is having conversation with the multiple users. So as you may be already familiar that your Rasa chatbot can handle multiple users, let's say more than 100 users your Rasa chatbot can handle at a time. But now, if in case, let's say I'm having three different friends, my three of the friends are talking to the same chatbot, right? So in that case, let's say my first friend say like hi, so in that case definitely my bot will reply with like, hey, how may I assist you, if in case I have trained it for that purpose, right? Similarly, let's say my other person, or let's say my other friend said some different message, and that different message is like, I want to know about your website, right? So this is how my other friend can enter the message, right? So in that case, what my bot have to do is, my bot will definitely have to reply with some other question. So how does your chatbot is taking care of all these different questions and answers at the same time? So the chatbot is capable, and chatbot is able to answer the question for different question at the same time, just because of one reason, and that one reason name is conversation ID. So in this, what my chatbot is going to do is, my chatbot is creating a separate conversation ID for each of the user whom my chatbot is going to talk to. So in that case, what will happen is, you will be having a unique ID, and based on that your chatbot will reply you with multiple answers. Or let's say you will enter some message, let's say my first user will enter one message, my other user will enter second message. So based on that unique ID, it can differentiate like whom is talking about the first conversation, who is talking about the second story. So this is all that your chatbot is taking care of at the same time, and that is just because of this conversation ID. So this is how your chatbot is taking care of everything. So this is all that we are going to learn in today's session. So now let's get started, and let's see how you can get the conversation ID of each conversation, so that your bot can handle that step, and also you can also further use that particular conversation ID to store and access the conversation which your other user is having a conversation with your chatbot. So let's get started, and let's see how we can do that part, right? Alright, so you can see in here I'm having a project for your Rasa chatbot, which I may have worked on in one of my previous session, right? So in today's session, as I said, what I will do is, I will show you that how you can get the conversation ID of a person whom your chatbot is talking to. So based on that, what you can do is, you can do further different tasks, whether to access the data, whether to store the data in whatever way you want to do, right? So it's totally up to you. But in today's session, I'm going to show you that how you can get the conversation ID of each of the conversation having with your chatbot, right? So this is all that we are going to do. So let's see how to do that part. So to make you clear about that concept, I will be using a very small conversation, and in that conversation what I will do is, I will simply ask my chatbot, or let's say I will simply ask my bot like, can you tell me the conversation ID, or let's say can you tell me the session ID, right? So in this way I'm going to enter some question, and based on that, what your chatbot will do is, your chatbot will return you, or let's say your chatbot will give you the reply with the conversation ID with which you are having a conversation with your chatbot, right? So this is what exactly we will be having in here. And one more thing, just keep in mind that this conversation ID which we will get from the bot, that conversation is ID is a unique ID, and this ID will be created as per the conversation which you are having with your chatbot. So that means for each user you will be having a separate conversation ID with respect to the chatbot. So this is all that we will be doing. So for that, let's start first. Let's first start with the NLU part, in which I will be telling my bot, or let's say in which I will be asking my bot to just provide me the session ID or the conversation ID, right? So for that, I will not waste much time. So I already have made some intents over here, right? So I already have one intent ready with me, so I will simply add it here. So right now I have just given it a name as intent colon ask underscore ID. So this is the intent name, right? I just copy it, and inside this you can see like I have mentioned 2-3 different sentences, right? So it's like, tell me the conversation ID, what's my conversation ID, tell me session ID, and this is how I have added multiple statements, right? So just copy this intent and just go to the domain file, and in here just add this intent name, right? So this is what I have done right now. Now based on this, what I want is, I want when my user will say, let's say, tell me the conversation ID, so definitely what my chatbot will do is, it will just classify that yeah, this is the intent, which is ask underscore ID. But based on this intent, what I'm exactly going to do, I'm exactly going to fetch the conversation ID, and I will be doing that stuff inside the actions file, right? So in this I have to write a class. So I will create a class and just give it a name, let's say action session ID, right? And just type action. All right, so in this you have to create two different methods. So first one will be the name as usual, right? And in here just return the name of it. So let's say action session ID, right? So this is the name which I have specified in here. Just copy this now and just add it inside the domain file, and you will be adding it in here. I'm not using this one, so I will be adding this, right? So I have added this over here so that it can directly link to the chatbot, right? And now go back. So this is the first method. So similarly you have to create a second method, and this time the second method will be async and def, and just write the name of it, and that is run. So you have to run it, right? Press enter, and inside this what we will be doing is, we will be just collecting that information, and that information is the conversation ID. So I have to just pick that part. So for that, let's say I'm giving it a name as conversation ID, right? Equal to, so this conversation ID will be fetched using this tracker which you are having in here. So tracker dot sender ID. So this sender ID is the conversation ID which we are having in here for each user to whom your chatbot is going to talk to, right? So this is what exactly I'm having in here. So this will provide me the conversation ID, and I will be storing it in here. And after that, what I want is, I just want to display this as a message to the user based on the input that the user will say. Like in my case, what I'm doing is, I am simply saying, just tell me the conversation ID. So based on that, your bot will reply. So the bot will reply over here. Let's say the conversation ID is whatever is the value, just mention it here, and that is conversation ID. Just write it like this, right? So in this way, what will happen is, whatever is the conversation ID, that will be displayed to you on the front end part. So the conversation ID is whatever is the ID, so this will be displayed in here. And as I already said, this conversation ID is the unique ID. So for each conversation, or let's say for every user, so for every different user, you will be having a different conversation ID, which will keep your conversation secret, and this will keep a separate track of all the conversation, right? So based on this, what your chatbot is also doing is, it is just storing all your conversation into the tracker store. So there you can get get the record of complete conversation, right? So based on this, you can also access the data, you can also store the data. So it's totally up to you that how you are going to use it further, right? So I'm done up to here. So the last thing is just return bracket open bracket close. That's it. So this is what I have done. I have just created a class, right? So now based on this, I have to create a story, but as you know, like this is not a bigger story, and this is not something like we can do some different task over here. So what we are actually doing in here is, we are just saying like, tell me the session ID, and based on this we can directly get the action called from here, right? So this is what I'm doing right now. So I'm not going to create a separate story. Instead, as you have already seen in the previous session, that I have already shown you that how you can use the triggers. So the same thing I am going to use in here, right? So just type triggers. So whenever this intent will be called, it will automatically trigger, action underscore session underscore id. So you don't have to create anything separately, you don't have to create any story in the stories.md file, right? So you can directly use the trigger and it will just return you the output for that, right? So it's totally up to you that how you want to use it, right? So this is all about that, and I guess everything we have done. So this was a very small conversation which I was about to show you, right? So everything is done from my side, so let's just train it and let's see whether it's working or not. So just go to the terminal and just type and also run the action server. Alright, so I made one mistake as well, so that's why I didn't train the domain, right? So I have to add this as well. So let me just train it again. So you can see the Rasa X is running over here and also the latest model is activated, right? So now let's go in here and let's talk to the bot and just ask for the conversation ID, right? So let's say tell me the conversation ID. So let's see. Alright, so can you see? This is the conversation ID which I have just extracted using the action file with respect to the tracker which we are having in Rasa Chatbot, right? So based on this, now you can see this is the conversation ID which you are having in here. And one more thing, like right now what I'm doing is my action server, or let's say my Rasa Chatbot is also running, and based on that you can see you are having this conversation ID. But suppose right now what I will do is I will just switch off the server, or let's say I will just terminate the Rasa X and I will rerun it. And again after that, if I will check for the same message, or let's say I will again check for the same thing, like tell me the conversation ID, at that time what will happen is it will just show you some different conversation ID, right? So right now as you can see, when I have said the same thing like tell me the conversation ID, the conversation ID is same, but if in case I will just stop and rerun it, at that time you will not get the same ID. Instead you will get the different conversation ID, right? And also you can check the same thing with different users, and you already know like how you can share your bot, right? So what you can do is you can just go to the conversations, and in here you are having one option to just share your chatbot with some different user, and based on that, whomsoever is going to talk to your bot, that will be having a different conversation ID. So just to make you clear, just to elaborate this part, I already have done some conversations over here based on the same thing, in which I can show you like here this is the first user, and based on that I'm having, or let's say I'm asking like tell me the session ID. So it is saying the session ID is something like this, right? Similarly, let's check for the other one. For the other one, the conversation ID is something different. So let's check for other one. So in here also the conversation ID is different. So in this way, with different user who is connecting, or let's say who is just having a conversation with your chatbot, you will be having a different session ID which will tell you, or let's say which will let's say keep all the users separate with a separate unique ID, which will help you to access the data as well as to store the data into the conversation, or let's say into the database or Excel sheet or anywhere, right? So wherever you want to store it, you can store it. Wherever you want to access the data, you can access it. So with respect to this session ID, it is very helpful for a chatbot to be a multitasking and to further get the conversation of all the users, right? So this is all about the session ID, this is all about the conversation ID, and I hope everything is clear to you. But still, if you are facing any kind of a difficulties in understanding this topic, then you can definitely leave a comment below in the comment section, And also, if you have liked this video, then do click on the like button, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, then do click on the subscribe button, and also you can press the bell icon if you don't want to miss any updates from my channel. So till then, bye bye and happy learning.